Let me tell you something that might make you uncomfortable. School doesn't exist to make you intelligent. It exists to make you obedient. And the strange part? Most people never question it. Think about it. For almost your entire childhood, your life followed the exact same structure. Wake up early, sit in a building, ask permission to speak, ask permission to leave, ask permission to use the bathroom. For 8 hours a day, you practiced following instructions, and everyone called it education. Now, don't get me wrong, school teaches useful things. You learn how to read, how to write, basic math. But once those basics are covered, something strange happens. The system stops rewarding curiosity and starts rewarding compliance. You're praised for doing what you're told, not for thinking differently, not for questioning the rules, but for staying quiet, finishing the assignment, and giving the answer the teacher expects, not the answer you actually believe. And over time, that does something to you. Because when you're a kid, you're naturally curious. You ask questions constantly. Why is the sky blue? Why do people go to work? Why do we have to learn this? Kids are born explorers. But after years in school, something changes. You stop asking questions. Not because you ran out of curiosity, but because you learned something important. Questions slow things down. Questions annoy people. Questions make you stand out. And standing out inside a rigid system is dangerous. So most people adapt. They learn the real rule of school. Don't cause problems. Just follow the instructions. Finish the worksheet. Memorize the information. Pass the test. Then forget it. Because let's be honest, how much of what you learned in school do you actually remember? Not much. Most students spend years studying things only to forget them weeks later, and yet the system keeps going year after year, generation after generation. But here's the part nobody talks about. School isn't just teaching information. It's teaching behavior. It's teaching you how to exist inside a system. A system where someone else decides when you wake up, what you study, how you're evaluated, and whether you're considered successful. And if you follow the rules, you get rewarded, good grades, praise, approval. But if you question things, you get labeled difficult, or lazy, or distracted. You see this, especially with creative kids. The ones who think differently. The ones who ask strange questions. The ones who get bored easily. Those kids rarely fit the system, because the system doesn't know what to do with them. School works best with one type of person, the obedient one, the student who sits quietly, completes tasks, and doesn't challenge authority. That student becomes the good student. But here's the uncomfortable truth. Being a good student doesn't mean you're learning how to think. It often means you're learning how to follow directions. And those are two very different skills. One creates thinkers. The other creates workers. Now imagine this system from a different perspective. Imagine you were designing a society, a massive one with millions of people, businesses, governments, industries. What kind of workforce would you want? People who constantly question everything? Or people who reliably follow instructions? Think about it. Factories need workers who show up on time. Offices need employees who complete tasks. Organizations need people who follow procedures. A society runs smoothly when people behave predictably. And schools are very good at teaching predictable behavior. Wake up at the same time every day. Sit in rows. Listen to authority. Complete assigned tasks. Repeat tomorrow. Sound familiar? Because that structure doesn't disappear after school. It just evolves. Instead of teachers, you have managers. Instead of homework, you have assignments. Instead of grades, you have performance reviews. The structure remains almost identical. And for many people, the transition feels completely natural because they've been preparing for it their entire life. But here's something interesting. Some of the most successful people in the world didn't fit that system very well. Entrepreneurs, artists, inventors, writers, people who changed entire industries. A lot of them struggled in school, not because they were stupid, but because their minds didn't work in straight lines. They asked too many questions. They got bored with repetitive tasks. They challenged authority. And those behaviors don't always lead to good grades, but they often lead to something else. Original thinking. And original thinking is messy. It breaks rules, it experiments, it tries things that might fail. School doesn't reward that very often, because schools have a problem. They need to educate large numbers of students at once. And when you're managing hundreds of students, efficiency becomes the priority. Standardized tests appear. Standardized curriculums appear. Standardized grading systems appear. Standardized expectations appear. Everything becomes standardized. But human minds are not standardized. And some people learn visually, some through experimentation, some through discussion, some through failure. But school has limited time and limited resources, so the system chooses the easiest path. One structure, one pace, one definition of success. And if you don't fit it, you start feeling like the problem. Maybe you were the student who couldn't sit still, or the student who got bored quickly, or the one who asked questions teachers didn't like answering. Maybe you started thinking something was wrong with you, but maybe the system just wasn't designed for how your brain works. And that realization changes everything, because suddenly the story shifts. Instead of asking why you're bad at school, you start asking why school is structured this way in the first place. And that question leads somewhere interesting, because modern schooling isn't actually that old. The structure we know today became common during the Industrial Revolution. Factories were expanding rapidly. Factories needed workers who were punctual, disciplined, and comfortable with repetitive tasks. So, schools adopted similar structures. Bells to signal time, rows to maintain order, schedules to control productivity. In many ways, schools were modeled after factories. Now, this doesn't mean schools are evil, and it doesn't mean teachers are trying to control you. Most teachers genuinely care about students. They're doing their best inside a system they didn't design. But the structure itself was never primarily about creativity. It was about organization, efficiency, control, and preparing people for predictable roles in society. But here's the problem. The world changed massively. Creativity matters more now. Adaptability matters more now. Problem-solving matters more now. And yet many education systems still operate with the same structure created over a century ago, which leads to a strange situation. Students spend years preparing for a world that barely exists anymore, memorizing information that is instantly searchable, following rigid instructions in a world that rewards flexibility, and competing for grades in a world that values skills. No wonder so many students feel disconnected, because deep down they sense something isn't quite right. But here's where things get interesting. Realizing the system has flaws doesn't mean the system controls your future, because the most important learning rarely happens inside classrooms. It happens when curiosity takes over, when you start exploring things on your own, when learning becomes self-directed, because now you're not learning for a grade, you're learning because you actually want to understand something. And that type of learning sticks. Think about something you were genuinely interested in. A hobby, a game, a topic you randomly researched for hours. You probably learned more about that in a few weeks than entire school subjects. Because curiosity is the most powerful learning engine humans have. And curiosity cannot be forced. It has to be discovered. But here's the uncomfortable truth. Most people never rediscover it. They leave school and keep following instructions, waiting for someone else to tell them what to do. And slowly life becomes a series of tasks, deadlines, schedules, expectations. Until one day they look back and realize something strange. They spent decades following paths they never actually chose, but a small group of people noticed the pattern earlier. They realized something important. School may have trained them to follow instructions, but adulthood gives them the freedom to choose their own. And that realization is powerful. Because once you see the structure, you stop being controlled by it. You start thinking for yourself. And that's when your real education begins. The only question left is what you choose to learn next.